Yeah.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for bearing with us and your patience. We're extremely sincerely sorry for those technical glitches, but we are here now with you and we will not go away. So, well, how does one speak of an art historian who is a respected speaker at a breathtakingly long list of prestigious universities and museums around the world? Yet, art history is only one part of his life mission. He's a filmmaker who has made over 140 deeply researched documentary films. He's an eminent photographer, Buddhist scholar, and a record setting traveler. Benoy K. Behl is known for his tireless and prolific output of work for the past 44 years. He has taken over 53,000 photographs of Asian monuments and art heritage. His photographic exhibitions have been warmly received in 74 countries across the globe. He is the person who, for the first time, photographed the Buddhist paintings of Ajanta in their true color and details. His book, The Ajanta Caves, is the most widely read book on Indian art history in the world. His other books include The Art of India in 2 volumes, Buddhism, The Path of Compassion, The Buddhist Heritage of Sri Lanka, Northern Frontiers of Buddhism, Buddhist Heritage of Andhra Pradesh, and most recently, Hindu deities worshipped in Japan. Mr. Behl is also known for having photographed the Buddhist heritage of the world across 19 countries. He is the first Indian about whom the American National Geographic magazine has done a major story. BBC World News have carried 3 news items about his work in India and in Vietnam. In 2014, the Japan Foundation gave a fellowship to Mr. Behl, which helped him to take further his studies and documentation of Indian deities worshipped in Japan. Since then, Japan Foundation have held the exhibition of Mr. Behl's photographs of Hindu deities in Japan many times in Delhi and in metro cities across India. It is said that Mr. Behl's pioneering research of this subject has made the most significant contribution to India-Japan cultural relations. Mr. Behl's film, which you're going to be seeing today evening, was sponsored by the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. Ladies and gentlemen, without much ado, I would like to introduce to you culture historian, filmmaker, and photographer Benoy K. Behl. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Great pleasure to be here with Karwaan to share with you some beautiful aspects of the culture of Asia. It is perhaps a miracle in the story of man, the travel of ideas across. What is it?
You have to move the camera a little up.
Okay. Yeah. I'll just say that again.
Is that okay now? It's okay now.
Yeah, I'll just say that again.
Thank you. 1 minute.
The travel of ideas across great natural barriers of mountains and seas and across the political barriers of nations is surely a miracle in the story of man. and the warm acceptance of the ideas of life by people in faraway places underlines the sameness of the human situation everywhere. And one of these greatest stories of the travel of ideas is the travel of deities and ethical concepts of life from India to the rest of Asia. Did you know that Hindu deities are worshipped in Japan as much as in India? In fact, certain deities who are practically forgotten in India these days, like Vayu or Varuna, are worshipped every day in the Buddhist temples of Japan. Did you know that there are hundreds of temples to Saraswati, scores of them in Tokyo itself? As a matter of fact, ancient concepts of Indian thought are very well maintained in Japan. We in India worship Saraswati with the Veena as the deity who stands for creativity and knowledge. She's worshipped in the same manner in Japan, but at the same time, they also remember that Saraswati is a personification of the river by that name. So Saraswati temples are there with Saraswati playing the Veena, and hundreds of temples of Saraswati are also there with Saraswati represented as water, a deity of fertility and abundance. Now, did you know that the Havan, Homa, is performed in Japan at more than 1,200 Buddhist temples, at least once, and in many temples more than once every single day. And the Havan is performed along with chanting in Sanskrit. And many Buddhist priests, many Japanese Buddhist priests are chanting the Sanskrit, though they do not know how to read Sanskrit. And how does that happen? That happens because Kana, the alphabet of Japan, was in fact created on the phonetics of Sanskrit to make this possible. Best of all, the 5th, 6th century script of Sanskrit, Siddham, is preserved in Japan, though it is forgotten in India today. At Koyasan in Japan is the only school in the world where Sanskrit is still taught with the Siddham script. I could go on for a very long time. There's so many things about the marvelous shared culture of India and Japan. But we will leave it to the film for us to see more details of that. But let me address one more point, which is that sometimes people wonder why there are so many Hindu deities in the Buddhist temples of Japan. Now, the fact is that Hindu deities are in all Buddhist temples everywhere. Even in China, in the Kizil caves, I have documented paintings of 6th century paintings of Garuda, of Venugopala, of Shiva and Parvati. Actually, what we should realize is that the Western term religion does not apply so much to the Indian faiths. In the Indian faiths are philosophic paths. They're beautiful philosophic paths, logical, marvelous philosophic paths that help us to discover the true beauty, the truth which is inside ourselves, and they take us on a path towards moksha, towards Brahmananda. And in this, there are no divisions between Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, etc., which were really created when the Europeans were studying Indian culture. So you would be interested to know that the earliest deities, the earliest Hindu deities, where are they found? The very earliest representation that we have is of Lord Indra. And where is he seen? He is seen in the Buddhist caves of Bhaja in Western India, in Maharashtra. Who is the other earliest deity? That is Lakshmi, Gaja Lakshmi. Lakshmi bathed by elephants who pour water upon her. And where is she to be found? She is first found in the earliest stupa railings of Buddhist stupas. She is found in the Bharhut stupa railings, which are now preserved in the Indian Museum, Kolkata. She is seen in the stupas of Sanchi and in other places. She is also seen in Jaina monuments. In fact, Saraswati is also seen for the first time in a Jaina monument from Kankali Tila near Mathura. So we must remember that, in fact, when you look at ancient Indian inscriptions, you come to realize that every single family that we know about from ancient India had in it somebody worshipping a Hindu deity, somebody worshipping a Buddhist or Jaina deity. So these separated religions are really a colonial construct. And that is why it is so natural, and that is why you find these so many Hindu deities in all the Buddhist temples of Japan. And my many thanks are owed to the Japan Foundation, who encouraged me in my research and gave me a fellowship for the final part of my research of this wonderful subject. My many thanks are owed to the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, who sponsored the film which you are about to see. My thanks are owed to Sujata Chatterjee, who was introducing me, who traveled with me to Japan, to so many places on 2 visits to document these wonderful images of Hindu deities in Japan, and to Ishan of Karwaan, who has so warmly invited me to share this information with all of you. But most of all, I must acknowledge my gratitude to the Buddhist temples of Japan. When this project was conceived, and when I was talking to my friends, other professors in the USA and other places about the shooting which I was planning in Japan, they were all very sure that Well, they asked me not to be disappointed when the Buddhist temples would refuse to give permission. Because indeed, the Buddhist temples of Japan, the priests, the chief priests, are very, very reticent. And normally, they do not allow interviews and shooting of deities. Of course, I had an advantage because 100 Japanese Buddhist temples have held my photographic exhibition on the Buddhist heritage of India and of the world. But still, knowing how reticent they are, I was not very sure. I wrote to 50 Buddhist temples, hoping that at least 4 or 5 would say yes. And, the work would still get done. However, all 50 of them said yes. And therefore, you have before you a film which, in many ways, is a very unique film and a great opportunity for the mutual understanding between the people of India and Japan. And I will come back and speak more with you after the film. Ishan, I would request you to please run the film now. Along with the ideas of Buddhism and Hinduism, the culture of Indian deities traveled across the whole of Asia.
Very interestingly, more than 80% of Japanese gods are originally Indian gods.
This close relationship between the people of India and Japan has not been known to most people. Well researched books on the subject are also not available.
Most of Japanese don't know. For example, I live in Kichijoji, in the outskirts of Tokyo. This Kichijoji literally means temple of Kisho goddess. And Kisho is originally Lakshmi. So thus, I came from Lakshmi town. This should be recognized by Japanese people, the bottom of Japanese culture. Indian culture is very strongly imprinted and developed in the Japanese way.
The Todaiji Temple at Nara is one of the oldest and most revered temples of Japan. The 48 feet high Vairochana here is the largest bronze statue in the world.
Already in the 8th century, Indian Buddhist monk named Bodhisena has arrived to Japan, and he inaugurated the eye-opening the ceremony of great Buddha of Todaiji Temple in 752.
Bodhisena and Buddhasthira, they then went to a temple nearby Dayanji where they started the teaching of Sanskrit in Japan for the first time.
When the Japanese studied Sanskrit in the 8th and 9th centuries, Sanskrit was synonymous with the Siddham script. This was used for writing Sanskrit since the 5th century in India.
Thus, Japan and India was very closely connected. If you go to Japanese tomb, you may find sit-down letters. No Japanese can read these letters written on the tomb timber. And again, in Japan, there is a Koya-san temples. In this Koya-san temples, they have still sit-down Sanskrit, the school. Many monks are learning this Sanskrit, but the Sanskrit is sit-down letters. So perhaps is Japan is a time capsule of Indian culture. Already in India disappeared.
There is a deep relationship between Kana, the Japanese alphabet, and Sanskrit. The Japanese wrote Sanskrit through simplified Chinese characters, which developed into the Japanese alphabet, Kana.
And this Japanese, the alphabet pronounced A, I, U, E, O, like Sanskrit, exactly as the Sanskrit.
In Japan, they also use the Indian letters for writing of sacred syllables or bijaksharas, which have the power of mantras. Every Buddhist monastery in Japan has a seal in which there is a bijakshara, a sacred syllable, as a short name of the monastery. There are some words in Japanese which are derived from Sanskrit, like O Seva, from Seva, service. And there are about 100 Sanskrit words which are used in Japanese.
Most of the Japanese, they are using that, but without knowing that that is the originally from Sanskrit. Suppose like they call the Buddhist temples at Thera. Thera means it is from the Pali term Thera, means a Buddhist monk, a bhikkhu having 10 years experience.
In the words of His Excellency Mr. Yasukuni Enoki, as I come from the Japanese Lakshmi town, it is no great surprise to me to find that Japanese life is full of so many Hindu deities. Japanese people are unaware of their origins. One of the most revered deities of Japan is Saraswati. There are scores of shrines built to her. In many ways, the original concept of Saraswati and her association with the natural order and good fortune are very well preserved in Japan. She is often visualized as a sacred body of water. In Japan, we find the continuance of so many early ideas of Indian philosophy. The annals of the Todaiji Temple mention that the celebration of the worship of Lakshmi and Saraswati was held for the first time in this temple in 722 AD. Ever since, it has been an annual celebration. In 1836, Saito Sachio wrote a guidebook to the Edo area or modern Tokyo. Saraswati was mentioned as the most popular deity here at that time. In 1934, Lady Chibin Sonyo felt that she had become an incarnation of Saraswati. She started writing in Sanskrit, though she had never studied the language. She founded the Benten Shu Saraswati sect. This sect holds water as divine, as it is the abode of Saraswati. We are reminded that Saraswati is the personification of the great river which once flowed in India. Benten Shu also worships her to bestow eloquence and learning. Worship of Lakshmi was done to ensure the peace of the land, wind and rain in good season, good harvests, joy of the people, and the good of all sentient beings. The great intellectual genius of Japan was Kukai or Kobo Daishi of the 9th century. He learnt the Sanskrit script from the Kashmiri Acharya Prajna. Kobo Daishi placed emphasis on a knowledge of Sanskrit. He said that the Japanese have had to rely upon translations to study Buddhism. However, the true words in the original language are exceedingly important. Every word has a profound meaning.
で、その時の神に拝む
The Japanese people use Sanskrit when they pray. Suppose in Sanskrit they say, Om Saraswati Swaha. In Japanese it becomes Om Saraswati K Swaka.
オンサラスバテイエイソアカというその礼拝の仕方も
In Japan, they are preserving the old Indian tradition because they are following the ancient scriptures. They are also doing the puja and the mudras as well as the sadhana.
ムドラですね。ムドラをしてね。そして
There is nothing called Japanese or Japanese elements in these. It is the Indian Buddhist Tantric tradition.
ストートラもあります。それを思って礼拝して。
The Vajrayana Buddhist traditions of Japan trace their knowledge back to India, to Nagarjuna and other great acharyas of the Nalanda University.
Nagarjuna is known as Gujyu in Japan. Without his teaching, the Buddhism of the great vehicle would not have existed.
The Lotus Sutra is a major spiritual creation with a profound impact on life in Japan. It was translated from the Sanskrit by Kumara Jiva 1600 years ago.
特に比叡山は
This is a temple that follows the Lotus Sutra. The sutra is originally from India and goes back to the teachings of the Buddha himself. It started from India and came to Japan.
A temple is dedicated to the deity Indra in the Shibamata area of Tokyo. It is a most important Indra shrine today.
長栄山大教寺のご本尊でありまして。
This temple has 200,000 visitors on the new year alone. There would be about 2 million visitors every year.
1629年
Varuna has been worshipped in many temples in Japan to prevent droughts, typhoons, and floods, which occur often in Japan. A shrine was dedicated to Varuna in the Fudodo Sanctuary in Tokyo in 1836. The temple also has a representation of Kamadeva. He is worshipped by many young couples. There are many temples dedicated to Yama in Japan.
The sound of the word Yama became Ema as the name traveled and came to Japan.
It is the most ancient temple to Lord Ganesha, which has been in use for the last 1,000 years. And young boys and girls go there to be successful in their courtship. The merchants go there to gain success in their business. The oldest, which has been continuously in worship for the last 1,000 years. And I don't think anywhere in the world we have a temple to Lord Ganesha who has been there in constant worship for the last millennium.
In the 7th century, Prince Shotoku created the nation-state of Japan after vanquishing his rivals. He took the term Tenno for emperor from Sanskrit texts.
And at the same time, he also wrote down a constitution for his country in 17 articles. Article 3 of the constitution clearly points out that the constitution is being based on the three Ratna, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. It is the first Asian constitution ever written. Important point is that its consecration was done with a Sanskrit text which is called the Ushnisha Vijaya Dharani.
The Sanskrit manuscript used for the consecration of the constitution would have been obtained from the Hindu kingdom of Champa in Vietnam. Havan or Homa continues in Japan, where it is called Goma. Goma in the Shingon and Tendai Buddhist sects of Japan has striking parallels with early Hindu rites of Agni worship. There are also deep similarities with the later Tantric tradition. The Havan is perhaps conducted in Japan at least as often as in India. The Tantric Shingon school of Japan sings Sanskrit hymns. To this day, followers of the sect perform their worship in 1,200 temples throughout Japan.
Esoteric Buddhism is from India, and the big philosophy of the universe is, of course, from India.
Vajrayana Buddhist worship in Japan is similar to Tibetan Buddhist worship. However, the Japanese tradition has preserved some early Vajrayana rites. A study of Japanese Buddhism helps to fill some gaps in our understanding of the development of Buddhism.
There are 4 types of Shingon mantras or Fudo-myu in Japan. These are the mantras used in Japan which are not in the Japanese language. They are taken from the Sanskrit language of India. In Sanskrit, Fudo is called Achalanatha. He seems to have his origin in the Hindu deity Shiva. The Mu is called Vidya Raja in Sanskrit. Here, it can be safely stated that Fudo Mu has his origin in the Hindu deities of India.
A sutra compares the cosmic force of the mantra with the mighty roar of a rising flood. The mantras were transcribed into ideograms, and to conserve their full power, they were also written in Siddham. Indian letters to a Japanese are sacred and stand for divine beings. To this day, the Japanese write mantras in Siddham.
This booklet contains prayers in Sanskrit that are commonly used in Shingonshu or esoteric Buddhism. It is written in Japanese, but the mantras are in Sanskrit. It is used in many ceremonies in Buddhism. Priests learn the intonation and how to pronounce it by using this booklet, which has Sanskrit and also has Japanese letters to convey the sounds of the Sanskrit words.
今言われましたようにね、ここは
Every god has his own Bija Akshara. People also worship that Bija Akshara. Every temple gives much importance to those Bija Aksharas because they are equal to God.
いろんな仏様、神様。
スタンプを押すその
Visitors bring an album. We call it Shinchin. The visitors go to various temples and collect these Siddham stamps in the albums. These albums are like holy books for the people.
ペーパーになってるのがありまして、
私たちは禅寺ですのでね。
We belong to a Zen Buddhist monastery, and we strive hard to sever the bond of birth, senility, disease, and death. The bond which is the cause of all suffering. As the Buddha said, desire is the root cause of pain in the world and should be overcome. This forms the basis of our ascetic practices, which come down to us from the Shakyamuni himself.
Bodhidharma, he transmitted Zen. Zen later has been transmitted to Japan also, and it is one of the most important sects in Japan.
Myths surround the legend of Bodhidharma. Tradition points out that he was a prince of Kanchipuram in South India. The Japanese form of his name is Bodai Daruma. It is very close to the Tamil form, which is Bodhi Daruma. Zen was introduced in the 6th century.
It was a wordless tradition, directly pointing to the human mind and the perception of one's true nature. Zen was taken to Japan in the 12th century by Isai. Its influence on Japanese art, attitudes, and language has been profound.
Zen Buddhism became very popular because it says that life is a fleeting phenomenon. And the samurai, when they went to war, they were never sure that they will come back. In this feeling, they go to war and there is no fear of death. So fearlessness in war was a very important contribution of the Zen tradition. And if you sit down, and when we sit down in a Zen monastery, you have to really do a very hard penance. And hard work in Japan is perfection. So it is the Zen tradition gave them a perfection in work. Course became a very important part of the modern development, perfection in everything.
初めてインドに参りましたとき、
When I visited India for the first time, I made sure to visit places like Nalanda University, Bodh Gaya, and also the garden path trodden by the Shakyamuni himself. I felt happy to see the university where Tripitaka masters used to come and study during the 3rd and 4th centuries AD. Whatever Buddhism we practice now has its roots in India, and without Indians, there would be no Buddhism in Japan.
この仏教はなかったわけでありますから。
インドでも日本でも
So many deities are common in India and Japan, and people are worshipping them in both the countries.
共通しているということはまさしく
The hearts of the Indian people and the Japanese people have the same base.
つながっている一つの証ではないかと思います。
Japan is the one country where Buddhism is flourishing in all its facets. Here, technology and transcendence are living together. The deep-rooted spirit of Buddha's teachings energize the Japanese people. Buddhist temples are numerous, and vast numbers of people visit them every day. Besides the Buddha, so many ancient Indian deities and practices are preserved in these temples. An Indian feels quite at home in Japan.
Such a pleasure to have shared this film with all of you. When I first traveled to Japan in 1993, I went expecting a culture which was very different. Somehow, Western media had got me used to the idea that the Japanese are very different people and that maybe they are difficult to understand. Instead, when I was in Japan, I found them to be wonderful people who seem to be, how shall I put it, much more Indian than Indians. The best part of our culture was so deeply reflected in them. Their courtesy was absolutely amazing. Their warmth and hospitality was something to be admired. Their respect for age. I remember when I was interviewed by a newspaper for the first time in Japan back in 93. The first question the reporter asked, and it was also the first thing which was printed right on top in the interview, was when was I born? They have that understanding that the same thing can have a different meaning if it carries with it the maturity of life experience, something which is being forgotten a great deal in the world today. Which brings me to what is important in all this great similarity of culture between the two countries which we are speaking about. Why is it relevant and why is it important for the world? It is important because India, ancient India, was revered because it stood for let's say, that have traveled with conquest and traveled with the sword. Indian philosophy did not travel like that at all. India was a great trading country, and Indian traders traveled far and wide. Now, what do you think happened? In the evenings, when the day's work of trade was done, and you can imagine perhaps just outside the city where the Indian traders were camped, they would be sitting in the evening, perhaps, and there would be local people with them. And what would have happened? You know that Indians love to talk. And what do they talk about? They talk about philosophy. And that is how it would have begun everywhere. People who heard them were deeply interested in the things which an Indian finds so easy to talk about. As a matter of fact, India is the only place I know, and I have traveled very extensively around the world. India is the one place where the most so-called common of people, domestic help, gardeners, anybody, talks marvelously about the philosophy of life. They speak about Maya or Mithya, the illusory nature of the material world. They talk about the importance of losing one's desires. And this is the so-called most common of the people of India. Even they are so familiar with philosophic concepts which it needs very serious professors to be able to discuss in many other countries. So this philosophy spread wonderfully. What happened? As a matter of fact, we have some examples that we know about where when a king, the king of Kucha in Central Asia, when he heard that there was an Indian who was on the highway and he was coming towards Kucha, what did he do? He set out with his retinue. He went and greeted him with great honors, brought him back to his palace, requested him to teach, and offered the hand of his daughter Jiva in marriage to this Indian whose name happened to be Kumarayana, 4th century. We know about this story. There were so many stories, I'm sure, like this everywhere. We know about this particular story because the child of Kumarayana and Princess Jiva, who was named Kumara Jiva after their two names, he became the most important person in the Buddhism of entire China. And therefore, he is extremely famous, and this history is very well known. His mother, Princess Jiva, took him to Kashmir, where he spent 13 years with her, studying Sanskrit and studying Buddhist scriptures. And when he came back to Kucha, he became this most important translator. In fact, it is said that China attacked Kucha and annexed it because of the importance of Kumara Jiva, whom they wanted. Now, that's the importance of Indians in the ancient period. You'll be happy to know that even today, when I travel to remote places in Asia, I'm met with a lot of respect by people simply because I'm an Indian. You're from India, the land of knowledge. Of course, this is not in the most so-called modernized of places, where the modern world has been changing very, very, very fast. But in remote places, it is like this. Anyhow, India did represent the greatest of ethical cultures, which was welcomed with open arms everywhere. And today, Japan is perhaps the country which has best preserved these marvelous ethical traditions which emanated from India. And you can see where their great success comes from. Discipline is a cultural value, and their discipline is so much. Their hard work is so much because of that discipline. Their values are so profound and deep and simple and complete. So, whereas the whole of Asia learned so much from us in ancient times, today there is so much also which must be learned from Japan. I think I have taken a lot of time, and I'll be very happy to answer some of your questions now. Ishan, would you please? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. It was truly a breathtaking film, and it was the genius of you that such a film was produced. Uh, so to begin with, I might just ask you a very basic question: that what was the main objective of the film, And do you think more films like these should be produced in India?
The main objective of the film is to convey the similarity of culture, the very, very deep similarity of culture between the people of Japan and of India. The ethical values which they follow, and the deities, the cultural traditions which the people of both these countries follow. And yes, of course, much more like this should be done. I have myself made 145 documentary films, essentially about similar things. Because ever since I began working on art history and working on Ajanta, I was profoundly moved by the compassion and grace and the marvelous philosophic qualities of Indian art that represent Indian philosophic thought. And all my films, all 145 of them, are essentially about the same thing, about, about the beauty of thought, grace, and that inward journey which takes us away from the noise and clamor of the material world to the peace which can be found within. Yes, I believe that lots and lots of films and books and writing should be done about.
Hmm.
Thank you.
So, in the research process, how much time it took you to research about it? Because it's a very well researched movie and film, and I think it took you a lot of time and pain to do this. Did you find any obstacles in doing this?
Well, first of all, I must say that if you would like to see more details, you could see my book, Hindu Deities Worshipped in Japan. And obstacles, I'm sometimes asked about obstacles in the work which I have done continuously over these past 44, 45 years. And I don't really, I don't really know about obstacles. I don't think about obstacles. When there is something that you have to do, you have to do it, and you simply find the way of doing it. Yes, of course, a film like this is a very challenging one, especially because each one of those Buddhist temples, each one of those chief priests that you saw are quite clear about the fact that they will not speak to a video camera,
Yeah.
that they do not allow any shooting in their temples. They're very reticent about keeping their knowledge and not just sharing it like that. So yes, I mean it is not the easiest thing, but Ishan, if there is something that you wish to do,
Hmm.
and you wish to do it with the right intention, that's the most important thing. Your intention is something which shows to everybody, no matter how smartly anybody talks, no matter what a smart talker anybody becomes, the intention still shows. So the simple fact is that if the intent is correct, then people do cooperate, they do come forward. And I can only say that I have a lifetime of, I mean, I've done so many projects when I've traveled 240 days at a time uh, in two projects, each one of them 240 days at a time, and sleeping in 200 different places in those 240 days, traveling hundreds of kilometers every single day out of those days, done so many things. But so long as the intention is true and deep, and you are wanting to do something which is for good reason. Good reason means for the good of all. If that is so, then please allow me to say nothing is difficult. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, those are the true words of wisdom. And sir, do you believe that Indians are in a blind race of modernization and development, and somewhere or the other they are forgetting their own heritage, and it is taking us, the Westerners are telling us about yoga and about our rich heritage.
We do have a great heritage. In fact, our greatest treasure for which we are truly respected and loved is our heritage. You
Yeah.
know, when a Japanese uh, priest or a senior person from Japan visits India, let's say he goes to Bihar, I've seen them picking up the earth from the ground and kissing it because it's the earth of India, it's the earth of Bihar. Now, that is the kind of heritage which we do have and we are respected for. Now, if we forget what our heritage is, because our heritage is philosophical, our heritage is ethical, our heritage shows the way to the greatest of thoughts. Our heritage shows us the preparation of the human being for the discovery of the Nirgun, the Arupa. That is what, that is how great it is. And it teaches us to look within. That is what we are respected for. And if we forget that, and if we try to ape, try to follow only the materialistic tendencies of the Western world, if we think it is just so important to have a bigger car and a bigger car and a bigger car and then an aircraft and whatever else, then we are just becoming second-hand imitation Westerners.
Yes.
And though they may use us as a marketplace because of our large population, they do not respect us when they can see that we are only second-hand Westerners. So I think it's enormously important. You were speaking of yoga. Now, Sujata has been traveling with me, and we have shot yoga practice in about 12 countries across 4 different continents and
Yeah.
in many, many, many cities in the process. In fact, it's so marvelous to wake up in the morning in the in the middle of the forest in South America, in Colombia, or to wake up in Grass Valley in the USA. So many places like that, and hear beautiful Sanskrit chanting. In fact, we've been hearing much more Sanskrit chanting abroad than
Yeah.
we do in India. So, yes, yoga is a marvelous thing. And what one must understand is that the art heritage and yoga and all the Indian philosophic traditions are all yoga.
Hmm.
Yoga means unity. It is a search for the unity of the human with all that there is around. The whole universe and you are only one. And that is what yoga is about. The asanas, what is an asana? Asana means seat. It is the preparation for yoga, because yoga is meditation. Yoga is a search of knowledge. And of course, there are different ways of doing yoga: bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, etc., karma yoga. But yoga is in fact the action part of Indian philosophy. And that's what makes it easier for foreigners and other people to come to it, to make a beginning. It is like the thin end of the wedge. Once that part goes in, then the rest of the whole body of Indian philosophy follows behind. Thank you.
Yeah. So, coming to the work that you have done in the Ajanta, regarding the Ajanta paintings, where you were the first photographer to capture the Ajanta painting in its true colors, and with, I think, what you call the low light photography. How do you see the genre of art, heritage photography coming up in India and impacting the society at large, creating awareness about our heritage sites and engaging the youngsters to explore heritage sites with their cameras, clicking it? And what are the drawbacks of these? Are they, uh, yeah, matlab, are they, threatening the heritage in a way by clicking, pictures?
Well, first of all, we must understand what is the true heritage and what is the manifestation of that heritage.
Hmm.
Because the artworks are a marvelous heritage in themselves, and they're also the manifestation of a heritage. Now, this is a
Yeah.
heritage of thought, it is a heritage of living, it is the heritage of knowledge, knowledge which has been carefully passed on through the intellectuals of so many generations, from father to son and across so many centuries. What is most essential and important is to try to understand that, which is where we have gone far behind. This beautiful ethical understanding of our early ancestors. This, which helps us to identify what is it that creates joy within us, what is it that creates peace within us, what is it that helps us to distribute the joy and peace to all that there is around us, to all the birds, to the trees, to everything. Now, that is the most important thing. And besides that, yes, documenting the art heritage is very important. I've had the joy of taking 53,000 photographs of Indian and Asian art heritage. Yes, photography does help to take the most sublime and beautiful examples of that art, examples of the expression of beautiful and graceful thought. So, photography does help to take that before the people. But more important than just clicking these things, with an attitude of acquisition or an attitude of some kind of achievement. More than that, far more important than that, is to understand the grace in it, to understand the grace which underlies all that there is. Because what is art? art, ancient art, as the Chitra Sutra of the Vishnu
Yeah.
Dharmottara Purana also puts it, the purpose of art is not just photographic reality or optical reality. The purpose of art is to convey the essence of grace, the essence of truth, which is in all that we see. And the moment you perceive that grace, you are actually in a state which is similar to Brahmanand. Because the veils of illusion, Maya or Mithya, have been lifted in that moment, and you're seeing that grace which is in all that is around. So there must be a focus on the true understanding, the graceful understanding, the beautiful understanding, as well as just a photography or documentation. Thank you.
So I think you would also agree with me on this that India's heritage and past is the key to the world's future. Our philosophies are relevant in today's time. It was relevant in ancient time as well. And I think India is still, and it will be the center of learning for many more years to come, as it was during the times of Nalanda and Takshila, where we preach the philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, and we also, preach the philosophy of public spaces like Kotuhalashalas in 500 AD, where Buddhist, Jain, and Hindu monks used to come and do regular debates and discussions. So, thank you very much, sir, for this truly amazing session. I think it was one of the best sessions of our festival. And many people are asking you about the documentaries that you have filmed, that where can they access them? Is it available online, or how can they see it?
Well, some of the films are to be found on my YouTube channel, and a few films are to be found on the Ministry of External Affairs Public Diplomacy channel. And I've now, after I've been conducting these, India Habitat Center has been showing one film of mine every month for the past many years. Doordarshan channels have shown my films. In fact, DD Bharati has been showing one film of mine, I believe, even these days. For the past 20 years, they've been showing one film of mine every day. So these are some of the possibilities. I've been giving courses on the history and appreciation of Indian art and culture. And of course, those courses can't be conducted just now because of the pandemic. And on the 8th and 9th of August, India Habitat Center are holding an online course, which I'm giving. So I suppose more things are going online now. So these are some of the possibilities that I can share. I would also say that my book, The Art of India in 2 volumes, uh, my book on the Ajanta Caves, published by Thames and Hudson, London, the book Indian Hindu Deities Worshipped in Japan, and some more books would provide some joy, I think. And it's been a pleasure. It's been a great pleasure to be here. And Ishan, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It was truly an honor for me to moderate this session with such a great legendary filmmaker of our nation, who is trying to revive the love for heritage in India. Thank you very much, sir, and thank you very much, everybody who joined us live. And this lecture will be available on our YouTube channel. So, those of you who want to watch this documentary again with a great discussion, followed by this documentary, can watch our video. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.